I would describe it as basically a massive accident in the middle of the Southern Californian desert that is completely alien, but also completely beautiful.
There shouldn't be this giant body of water, but there is this giant body of water. It's only like 3 hours from LA, but it's so far removed from the city. If you want to go somewhere that feels like it's another world, then go to the Salton Sea.
You know, you've been in this basically white desert, you know, it's very light and harsh, and you come over this hill on 10 and you start down into the Coachella Valley there. And from the top of that valley, you see the white coming down, and then the whole bottom of the valley is green, and the Salton Sea is laid out at the end of that. And it's just this complete contrast. I mean, it's a little bit like the old 50s images of terraforming Mars, where you've got this white desert and then this lake and all these green, lush farms, literally a line between them.
There's not many places on Earth that are so desolate, so flat, so smelly, so strange. It just feels like otherworldly. It's a very bizarre feeling to be, you know, around the Salton Sea, especially. It was created as an accident. The Colorado River flooded the region, but also that's not an unprecedented thing. That happened naturally in the past too. That basin would fill up and drain out eventually. And we're currently in the process of the Salton Sea basically evaporating away.
It was very like apocalyptic. Like I just get that feeling there. It's a calm, it's a peace, and it's a history, and there's some kind of aura or spirit there that I feel and that I enjoy being around.
And even the fact that the lake bed is like ancient, you know, and that it's refilled over the ages. I mean, it's like this ancient landscape, right? It's like a time capsule almost, but it's also sort of like dystopian. It is sort of like this moment in time. You can kind of picture that era. Obviously, that's like, you know, it's heyday, you know, it's peak, you know, the Beach Boys, Frank Sinatra, all these people go in there, but it's like you can kind of feel that in the things you see. So that just kind of fascinates me, the juxtaposition between this like decay and this beautiful thing.
We'd go water skiing all the time. The yacht club, the whole marina with all the docks was in there. And there was, you know, women in bikinis and boats, kind of a scene. But, you know, as a little kid, there were a ton of people around. There was the yacht club was there. That was a super swanky, fancy place. You almost, as kids, you almost didn't go in there because it was so fancy. All these things happened in the early 80s. It kind of never came back from that flood. It got a lot of bad press, and among other things, that killed it, I think.
It's not a very good place, in my opinion, to live at. In summer, the weather gets to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. It's unbearable.
It's like, it's so like brutal out there in the summer that it just sort of, stuff just crumbles like the fish cartilage, and it just kind of becomes that weird sand. From far away, it looks like it's sand, but then when you get up close to it, you look at it and it's all these little broken up old bones and old barnacles, and it's very crunchy under your feet. It's, you know, it's not the kind of beach that you would want to lie on, but it's very interesting to walk on.
There was ones that were almost skeletons. There were bone pieces. There were, you know, in all different stages of decaying.
The texture of the sand, barnacles and shells, bones of all the animals that ever died in that, so that it crunches with each step. The mud that make your feet sink in like quicksand covers your shoes in just this muck. The covering of salt everywhere, it just touches everything. Salt is everywhere.
It's pretty much a ghost town. Lots of houses are abandoned. There's houses that are like in the half, they're not even done. It's just like the structure. You can see the wood, and there's not even walls, maybe the roof, but that's it. And like I say, it's very sad because it used to be a nice place to live at. Like, it seems full of life.
It definitely isn't intended anymore for visitors. Like all these signs were kind of telling you welcome to Salton Sea Beach. And you could tell it was made, retro, like years ago. In reality, even if you followed them very accurately, you were never going to get there.
Canals over there used to be full of water, and the water's kind of turned this reddish rust color, and it's interesting, but it also just shows how serious the collapse is.
You do lose, just because nobody's there, you lose some of that humanity.
Sort of has this like stereotype of like, oh, it's abandoned. I mean, people live there. It's not abandoned. It's just a small town. I mean, there's small towns, but yeah, it's far from abandoned. And I feel like there's a lot more people actually visiting it nowadays with the art and stuff like that down there, especially in Bombay Beach.
Bombay Beach is a very interesting place because there's reclaimed art and stuff that people have set up there and just kind of let rot in the wind.
You see like stacks of old televisions and that have been spray painted, and all these other just really eclectic views of what a neighborhood would look like.
There's all these houses that are sort of half, that are kind of falling apart, and they have all those like different spray paints inside of them, like people have painted interesting art inside of the walls.
There was a beached pirate ship made out of driftwood and found materials from the area and abandoned places.
And so you can kind of see the outline of the marina. You can kind of picture, wow, that's where boats actually used to go in. And now the water's many yards in the distance, hundreds of yards down from there. And then another area that I really like is in the Bombay Beach Drive-In, where, there's all those like old cars lined up. It's just interesting because it's all like stuff that was around the sea that was found. And so there's all this rusty stuff everywhere that makes kind of a perfect template to make it into like other art forms. When the sun sets, like it's all these pinks and oranges and purples, and just is this glassy like mirror kind of effect where you just have like a silhouette of the mountains, see like the reflections of the birds just like perfectly on the water. When the sun finally goes down most of the way, all the colors in the sky are at like their peak, and you can just see that in the water. So you have this like reflection of the colors, and then they're also right above you in the sky. It is so different night from day. I think it's really equally beautiful. I mean, you just notice different things in the nighttime or the daytime. It makes me feel very at peace. Sometimes you can see the Milky Way, and there was a couple times that I saw like a bunch of shooting stars in a row from there. they called it like Pirates Alley. It had this, you know, the lights there. And then, yeah, there's that thing that's like a ring, and you can step inside of it and be surrounded by the lights. I love that. Like, it's kind of spooky and interesting at night.
The stillness of the air and the flatness of the water, just glass-like all the way to the horizon until mountains reach it on the other side. There's sort of a mist that forms above the water and kind of obscures the hills and mountains on the other side. The lack of anyone around there, and that you are really the only person who's seeing this at that time, feels like you might as well be on a different planet.
You know, when there weren't people around, you'd just get these spectacular days where we'd be the only boat on the lake. It's literally glass smooth. You don't see land, and actually the sky and the water just merge, and you really literally feel like you're just flying in midair, because there's clouds above you and clouds below you, and there's no, in front of you, there's no line, because it's just a little bit hazy, and it's so smooth that the sky and the water just kind of become one.
The drive out there was beautiful. We had white, fluffy clouds over the mountains. The mountains were as clear as could be. The sea was even glistening. And even though it was a beautiful day and beautiful weather, what really impressed me, or depressed me actually, was looking at where the sea used to be. It's just so far away from the highway.
There was a bunch of water agencies that San Diego needed water to develop, and so they fallowed a bunch of fields in the Coachella Valley and sent the water to San Diego so San Diego could build more houses and development. But for some period, they directly put the water into the Salton Sea to keep the level up. They stopped putting water in the sea at all, and so that's why it's shrinking so fast now.
Also, migratory birds use the Salton Sea. From South America to Canada, Alaska, there's a lot of birds that would stop off there at the Salton Sea, and a lot of them are dying now because of this, the salinity, the chemicals that are in the water.
All of the wetlands along the coast have been ripped up and turned into fancy shorefront housing. So the birds rely on the Salton Sea, and now that the Salton Sea is going away, it's like, you know, anyone that says, oh, they didn't have the Salton Sea before, it's like, no, you took everything else they had away in the meantime. They need the sea.
I mean, everything is so developed in Southern California, and this is one of the last areas for a lot of those species to stop. Setting aside the fact that it's beautiful and it really is an awesome place to visit, is just that because the dust is so toxic, the particulates are so fine, there's terrible stuff in the dust. You know, there's a reason that Imperial County has such a high rate of asthma, higher than anywhere in the state. You know, that dust is going to get so far that it's going to make Palm Springs uninhabitable if it dries up. It's going to make even Los Angeles, it's going to affect pretty much all of Southern California if it dries up.
It's one of the biggest natural disasters that might happen in the future if nothing is done.
Even as the trailers melt away and the things around it crumble down, there's still just this sort of like raw beauty out there that's you know, really a one of a kind.
It makes it very special that it is so fleeting in some respects.
It's one of those sad things, but you know, over the course of the world's existence, how many times has the land changed and things died, and that's going to go away and something else is going to be there, and then something else, and you know, that's just the way the world and nature seems to work. Just appreciate those kinds of things is, I think, the best, in my opinion, we could do.